in fact, many very good teachers in our system say that, the way in which the mind to finger to mouth eye type of connection happens when you put the chalk piece onto the blackboard is very unique, and you can't get it in any other way. But that is fine, but embracing other modern conveniences that technology has given us into our pedagogy, at least because it will connect well with our young audience, I think is important. So as teachers, being up to date on technology.
Hello, and welcome to the Ananta Speaker Series presented by Carnegie India, celebrating stirring stories of empowerment, struggle, and success from women professionals in different fields across the globe. Stories we hope are bound to inspire young professionals. I'm Sumbul Jahangir, working with the communications team at Carnegie India. Today, we are honored to have with us Dr. Preeti Agalia. Preeti is the director in charge and dean of the School of Engineering and Science at the Zanzibar campus of IIT Madras. Dr. Agalia earned her BTech in Chemical Engineering from IIT Madras and her PhD from University of Massachusetts. She served as an associate professor at IIT Bombay before joining IIT Madras as a professor in the Chemical Engineering department. Recognized as one of the 75 women in STEM by the Principal Scientific Advisor's Office, Dr. Aghalia has made notable contributions to the Gender Advancement for Transforming Institutions program at IIT Madras. Preeti became the first woman to head an IIT as the director in charge of the new IIT Madras campus in Zanzibar, Tanzania. This achievement marks a significant milestone for women in engineering and academia. Dr. Galiam, it's a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Sumbul. It's a pleasure to be here as well. Thank you for thinking of me.
Okay, beginning with our first question, Preeti, your journey from being a student at IIT Madras to becoming the first women director of an IIT campus is truly inspiring. Can you tell us about your journey and experience in rising through the ranks as a woman in STEM field? And if there are any personal stories or moments from this journey that were particularly impactful for you?
Sure, thank you. So I was a student very long time ago at IIT Madras, 91 through 95, and I studied in the chemical engineering department. So in 2010, when I moved back into the same department as a faculty, it was such a strange feeling. I'm going down this corridor where I used to go as a young student, knocking on professors' doors to maybe I submitted a homework late, or I wanted to ask them something for a recommendation letter or something like that. And then I was their colleague, and I was next door to them. My office was next door to them. It was such a strange feeling, but I must say that I was welcomed so warmly by all of them, and they always told me that we believed in you, we believed that you would work hard and achieve the goals that you set out for yourself. And everybody knew that from the time I was a student, it was my aim to become a professor. My family is all academics, my parents, grandparents, grandfather, everybody. So it just was a line I was going to follow for sure. So they were very encouraging when I came back. And then subsequently, I've been there in IIT Madras now 1.5 decades. My husband is also an alumnus of IIT Madras, and we have a network of friends that are alumni or professors there, and it's almost like IITM runs in our blood. And for me it felt very meaningful to be involved in activities in the institution. So I was chair of the women's forum for a little bit. I actually did during COVID a YouTube series on women in STEM, where I was, like you, Sumbul, interviewing women colleagues and asking them what makes them tick, and what are inspiring things that they could say to younger generations. We did do the gender advancement program that Department of Science and Technology put together, and that also was very nice because it was a reflective one where we studied everything related to gender about IIT Madras, and what are policy shifts we need to do, not only all the negative stuff but also what are good things that is there in the institution that works for the minority women in the system. And so through all of that global engagement and internationalization, I do love to travel, and I do believe strongly in the importance of diversity in any situation to articulate the best solutions to problems and things like that. And having an opportunity to explore that strategic direction forward for IIT Madras, I'm just so very grateful that I was one of the people that was in the original team that visited Zanzibar. And then subsequently, when the institute administration and everybody else found it in their hearts to give me this responsibility and this opportunity to be head of this very unique campus here in Zanzibar. So I would say, when I look back, I'm just so happy. I'm so grateful that these opportunities have presented themselves to.
Yeah, that's really incredibly inspiring. Speaking of your current role as a first women to lead an IIT campus, what are some of the unique challenges and opportunities you foresee at the IIT Madras Zanzibar campus? How do you plan to integrate your vision with the cultural and educational dynamics of Zanzibar?
So I think first of all, we are the first institution of our kind. Even the partnership is unique in right from the conception of it. A delegation from Zanzibar and Tanzania visited us, and they were so impressed with where IIT Madras is today. It's not like they're unaware of institutions in the West, but they saw the way IIT Madras is operating and growing and making itself relevant to today's people and today's world, and they were impressed. And they reached out and said that an institution of your sort is what we want in our country. We believe that it will serve the people around here and the world in a very unique way. And it's not that we come in here and it's all entirely IIT Madras. It's not like that. It is a coming together of Zanzibari traditions, educational aspects, priorities, government priorities, etc., with blending that in with those of India today, and also of India's top academic institution, which is in several realms. So I think it's a journey that is so unique in itself, and I'm an academic. As I was saying in the earlier question, IIT Madras runs through my veins, and I guess I was also in the right place at the right time. So in terms of the experience, being able to bring the essence of IIT Madras into this really welcoming and warm place that they have received us with open arms, and ensuring that we take the right, we evolve the strategy in a way that is correct for everybody, that is correct for India, it's correct for Zanzibar and Tanzania, and also IIT Madras. So I would say that that has been, of course, a challenge, but also the biggest opportunity out here.
Um, it's fascinating to hear how you plan to navigate. You have been navigating the different challenges of two different countries. Uh, Preeti, you have also, like, moving on to another notable aspect of your career, you have also been recognized as one of the 75 women in STEM, which is a phenomenal achievement. What do you think are some effective ways to inspire young women to pursue careers in STEM, especially in regions where opportunities might be limited?
So I think in our country there's already a very strong tradition of women, at the school level doing very well academically in science and math and so on. Particularly in high schools, you see how the top marks, if you judge that is success, one parameter of it, I'm sure. There are women that are there, and women are doing extremely well. Even at college level, I think lot of large percentages of our classes in across many disciplines are composed of women in India. And in a way, we do so much better than other places in this regard. But when it comes, I think the gap comes when you look at long term careers and sort of escalation or climbing up, say, a corporate or other ladder, career ladder. That is where I think we lose our women. It's a very complex problem. It's not, there's no one sort of band-aid solution that we can come up with. There's a societal perception. There are the support systems that women need in order to fit ourselves into a full-time career and growth trajectory that is, it's hard. It has many aspects, and there are 24 hours in the day for any of us, and we have expectations of us from ourselves, from families, from societies that we have to meet and things like that. But I would say there's things like the 75 women in STEM that the Prime Minister's office did. It's great. I think all of these things help. Your speaker series also helps, I think, because it gives some young woman somewhere the idea that they can be in this, they can grow up to be one of these people. In, not exactly like me or you, but in their own unique way, which is going to be better than you or me or anyone in that list. So I think I'm glad that they did it. I feel very embarrassed that I'm in that list. It seems such a big deal, but I'm happy also because it also gives us a network of women that we can reach out to and maybe share some of the challenges we are facing particularly and how they have solved it, learn a little bit from them and things like that. So I think it's important definitely to motivate and inspire young women, and this sort of thing helps, but it's also possibly more important to build very mindfully the support structures that will very specifically help them in their unique journey.
Yeah. So building upon what you just said, inspiring young women. So for our audience, the women watching today, um, who aspire to reach leadership positions in academia or industry, what advice would you offer them? And are there any specific qualities or say mindsets you believe are crucial for overcoming obstacles and achieving success?
Everybody has obstacles, I think, that they face, and sometimes if you think about it, you feel like these obstacles have been placed in front of you specifically, and it's almost like you have the tools within you to overcome these obstacles. Otherwise, why would they be in front of you? And it's like every path has whatever boulders or mountains or trees to climb or whatever, but you're only encountering that because it's your path. So I think young people, what I would say is, first of all, be yourself. To me, I think it's very important that we are ourselves and don't try to fit into any mold, because minute, you know, I don't know, minute I try to fit into some mold, it backfires and it doesn't work for me. I have to be Preeti. At any point, I have to be Preeti. I have to be Preeti Akalayam. But on the other hand, you have to be mindful about, your changing role in the world as well, and you have to grow in a way that is unique to you but works for you for the challenges that are ahead of you. I don't think that this is gender specific at all, that we get bogged down by the challenges in front of us. So I would say this to all the young people, that believe in yourself, be yourself, believe that you can overcome the challenges that are placed in front of you, and once you cross those mountains or hills or whatever that are in front of you, look back and feel proud that this was me, I did that. So that would possibly be my message to all young people, men and women.
Well, your advice is sure to inspire many. Moving on the conversation, I would like to know what you think about interdisciplinary collaboration and what role it plays in solving today's complex scientific and engineering problems. And if you have worked in any such project of interdisciplinary collaboration.
Oh, that's such a wonderful question. I think, as an educator, a lifetime educator, I can see that the pattern in the tea leaves is changing today. And sometimes when I think about it, maybe it was always a little bit different than we perceived it, and we were just blind to that pattern that we are seeing. But the words that you use are perfect, because I believe that much of innovation that will happen today, much of meaningful, effective, impactful innovation that will happen today is at those interdisciplinary edges. And if we silo ourselves and say, I'm X or Y and I will not, I don't have anything in common with you who's in the other silo, I don't think it's helpful at all. In fact, I know that we are doing a lot of focus on STEM, for example, and women in STEM in particular, but that shouldn't be at the exclusion of social sciences or arts also, because in my field, for example, chemical engineering, if I turn a blind eye to economics, for example, saying that's not part of STE and it's not going to work. It's not going to be an effective way to solve challenging problems. So here at IITM Zanzibar, our wish and hope is that we bring a very strong interdisciplinary focus into our education. Our current program is data science and AI. That itself is, in and of itself, is a very diverse, cross-cutting type of field, and it informs and is informed by every discipline that is out there today. So we said it was a no-brainer that should be what we start with. But even in the future, all our programs we are envisioning will be of interdisciplinary nature. Bring the best of what is there at the interface of disciplines, so that we can bring the most effective set of solutions and understanding and knowledge to the young people. We have also thought of it as sort of, if you're familiar with the Japanese concept of ikigai, we've sort of thought of it as something like that, what are areas that young people want to study today, something that is exciting for them. We want to give them programs that are exciting for them. And what are concepts and ideas and disciplines and departments that the world needs from young people, or what the future needs of the world are going to be. And the third circle in our ikigai is what will get people meaningful jobs and job opportunities, or startup entrepreneurship type of opportunities. The corporate sector wants it, governments want, or there is a possibility of startup entrepreneurship innovation in that. So that's our third circle. And only the fourth circle happens to be the type of skills and expertise IIT Madras has. And in the interface of these four things are the programs that we want to bring. And we expect that in that intersection of the four circles is going to be a set of very interesting, modern, 21st century, global facing interdisciplinary programs at several levels.
No, I think that's a great example of how powerful collaboration can be. You mentioned AI and like keeping up with the latest uh, things out there. So, in today's world, rapidly evolving technological landscape, as a director of IIT, how do you ensure that the curriculum remains cutting edge and incorporates emerging technologies effectively? And looking ahead with AI and other innovations reshaping engineering, how do you see the field evolving?
So that's a great question. So as we've evolved these programs, I think there are three particular big aspects to look at. One is the curriculum itself, and each of these require rethinking and not carrying forward baggage of 50, 60, 100 years ago, whatever we've been doing in our engineering institutions all along. One is the curriculum itself. So the curriculum is composed of elements which are, some of it is just fundamental conceptual background and grounding that we want students to have. That we can look at it, but that's going to be, not significantly different today than maybe a few years ago. And the advent of AI and other sort of new phenomena, so to speak, may not inform that, may not cause bring about a need for us to change that significantly. But aside from that, every curriculum has many elements that go beyond the core or the fundamental grounding, because most students' journeys through degree programs, every student's journey is unique, because apart from these fundamental type of courses that all students do together, there are elective courses, there are internships that they do, there are project work that students engage in as they explore their own unique traverse through college, and also figure out their exit pathway right out of college, whether it is further studies or job opportunities and so on. So I think all of this, not only AI, but everything that's happening in the world today, the focus on the sustainable development goals, and everything has to tie into that. And climate change staring us in the face everywhere we turn. So incorporating all of those new things we know about the world we live in today into a curriculum, I think that is very important, and that's one thing that we are doing definitely. The second aspect is pedagogy. As teachers, it's I'm sure you think, how I teach is I go to a board and I write down a bunch of equations or some words and put a colon and write the definition and so on. There is value to that for sure. In fact, many very good teachers in our system say that the way in which the mind to finger to mouth eye type of connection happens when you put the chalk piece onto the blackboard is very unique, and you can't get it in any other way. But that is fine, but embracing other modern conveniences that technology has given us into our pedagogy, at least because it will connect well with our young audience, I think is important. So as teachers, being up to date on technology and what the audience, what our students are interested in, be it Instagram stories or thread or TikTok even, or whatever, I think is important. And there's a lot of focus on games and gamification as a way to have engaged learning, deep learning, fail safe learning, so that you feel safe when you're learning, etc. I think making those pedagogical shifts as teachers, embracing the need for those pedagogical shifts is very important. And the third aspect is really the student experience. Students should be, in today's world, students need to have experience even before they leave college. They need to have experienced the world out there very specifically. So projects, they need to do field work, they need to do during the college terms are only whatever 14 weeks into 2. That's approximately all that you do, especially at an undergraduate level. All the rest of the time in the year that you have, it should be, of course, little bit of fun is important, but engaging with the real world, taking every concept that you learn in college and figuring out how it places itself into the real world, and becoming an aware global citizen. Focusing on that is important, and making sure our students have the opportunities to do that is another responsibility of an educator, I think. So across these three, curriculum, pedagogy, and student experience, ensuring that you thread through modern aspects, including but not limited to I believe is very important.
It's exciting to hear about the forward thinking approach you're taking. Shifting gears a bit here, let's talk about your personal interests outside of your professional life. I read that you are a marathon runner and a blogger. So, how do these passions influence your perspective on, say, life and work? And are there any parallels between the discipline required for marathon running and the persistence needed in academia and research?
Very interesting question. So, first of all, a marathon, first thing you need is patience, I think, because when you're in, and also perseverance, obviously. But even during, you don't run okay, it's not recommended that tomorrow you run a marathon. You need a training period of maybe 16, maybe more number of weeks before you embark on a marathon. And just to get through the training that's required to present your best body at the start line of a marathon requires tons of patience, and that's also what a professor, an academic, an administrator in academia needs. So I think it helps. It sort of helps to be a runner and then be here. The second thing is that a marathon is a lot of long, alone running miles, right? Of course, many of us form friendships around running and build a network. But even aside from that, you're in your mind a lot in those long miles. And so that brings a certain reflective nature into you. I think by nature, lot of runners are reflective, and again, that is a quality, I think, as educators and academics, that helps us a lot. It helps us certainly in research, because you can sort of strategize and come up with methodologies or ideas or your eureka moments during that type of alone time, but also as educators, as you try to think of pedagogy and the exact way to answer one student's question in the class, which is a unique perspective that you hadn't thought about. So I think that also helps. And I think writing, I know you said I'm a blogger. I haven't opened out my blog in a very long time. That was something, I think, small and silly I was doing when in the early days of motherhood, a long time ago. I just needed a vent for what was going through my head. But I do love writing, and as a craft, I think that that's such a unique skill, and that's a unique way in which you can bring yourself to others, or even there are many bits of writing that I do that never see the light of day, that nobody else sees it. But for myself, it's always is has been a very good vent, and I think curricula need to have more of that. And in that way, I believe that it has helped. Over here, when our team put together the unique curriculum for this unique place and this really diverse set of students we have here, it's an data science and AI, it's an IIT degree, but we have so much of writing as part of the curriculum. And that's because for many of us, our experiences writing, journals or blogs or various things helped articulate thoughts better, and we felt that our students need that as well. So in some approximate way, I hope I've answered your question.
No, wonderful. I mean, it's really great how your personal passions feed into your professional lives. Uh, Finally, as we wrap up our conversation, I would really like to know about life in Zanzibar. It must be quite different from other places you have lived. What has been your experience so far? And is there something unique about Zanzibar that you particularly enjoy? Any favorite local spot or activity or food you would recommend?
So much to say about this. So I have lived, I'm from Mysore in Karnataka in South India. So I grew up there. I've lived in Chennai, Madras during my undergraduate years. I've lived in the US, a handful of cities in the Northeast, and then Bombay for a little bit. Chennai for longer duration, and then now I've been in Zanzibar for about a year. This place is so unique. It's I cannot compare it to any of the other places across these countries, continents that I have lived in. And there are many things, food, beach, all that is there. But the most important thing, the most awesome thing about Zanzibar are the people. They are, it's always a smile on people's faces. From early in the morning, I step out for a run, everybody greets you so pleasantly. They don't understand what you're doing. They're like, why is this running? Is something chasing her? But they smile and say, hello, madam, how are you? Are you doing exercise? How is your day? How did you sleep? How did you wake up? All of this. And the people are they're just fantastic in that way, and making those human connections has been just remarkable over here. And to a person, everybody, in the grocery store checkout or the small vegetable shop when I go to buy things, our own staff, our own students that are local over here, all the way to the president, they're all smiling all the time, so pleasant, so lovely. And they come at you like with a very distinct warmth that I haven't seen in many places. Although Mysore is a lovely place, it's a small city, not like a big grown-up city yet, even in 2024. But even for a girl from Mysore, even for a woman from Mysore, this place is so unique. And there's a blueness of the sky and the ocean that come together, and it's like your background but better, and that's also really unique, I think. And there are I could go on. There are spectacular sunsets. It's just like paint with all the colors in your box kind of sunsets. And you get out, when I can get out of my office before the sunsets, and I live near the beach and I see the sky near my home, it's like, okay, this is just so good. This is so fantastic. Food is good. There's no problem. I'm vegetarian, but I get really good fresh food. I also cook for myself, which I enjoy most of the time. So it's been such a lovely experience. But first and foremost, and last and also definitely not the least, are the people.
You have very beautifully described Zanzibar. It sounds so like, and actually I can imagine while when you were speaking. Coming to an end, thank you so much, Preeti, for taking the time to have this conversation today. And to our audience, we hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did. Do visit Carnegie India's YouTube channel to access all the episodes of the Ananta Speaker series. Thank you and see you next week.
Thank you.